Chapter 7 of Advanced Public Relations deals with legal issues. First, we will consider the difference between civil law and criminal law. Then we will examine the role of public relations when the company is involved in a high-profile lawsuit. And businesses must follow the Postal Service regulations as well. The Securities and Exchange Commission regulates the disclosure of information related to the stock market. Other governmental agencies also issue regulations that impact businesses. The First Amendment of the U.S. Constitution protects free speech, including commercial communications. Civil law deals with disputes between private parties. It may involve harm caused to someone by a business. The two parties do not have to have a contract or even a relationship in order to have a lawsuit. For example, someone walking by a storefront may slip on ice, which the law says the owner should have cleared from the sidewalk, and they may have an injury that results in a lawsuit against the store. More often, lawsuits result from disputes between two parties who have a legal contract with each other. While the concept of oral contracts exists, they are limited to small amounts of money. For the most part, contracts are written agreements between two people or two organizations. There must be a meeting of the minds, which means an informed agreement. The covenant must be characterized by an offer from one party and acceptance by the other party. Usually the offer and acceptance are written documents. For example, one organization may want to purchase something, so they send a purchase order to it, which is an offer to buy. If the seller agrees with the terms of the offer, they will reply with a sales confirmation. But there is no monetary damages until one or the other party takes an action in reliance on the contract. Public relation professionals may be called as witnesses. In some cases, there may be a witness for the client, or there may be an expert witness for a third party. Criminal laws cover offenses against society as a whole, in contrast to civil law, which covers disputes between two private parties. People are generally charged in criminal cases, although corporations can also be charged with some criminal offenses. You can't put corporations in prison, but they can be fined, or courts can restrict their actions. The Foreign Corrupt Practices Act makes it illegal for American citizens to pay bribes for business purposes anywhere in the world. Most of this chapter's discussion is about the federal government laws, but state and local governments also pass laws that regulate businesses. Public relations are especially tricky when the organization is involved in legal proceedings. Lawyers frequently make public statements during a legal dispute in an effort to affect the public opinion in order to pressure the other party to settle the dispute out of court. In that case, the role of public relations is to counteract these attacks, but it's a very delicate situation. The public relations message must not undermine the organization's legal position, and it must be credible. Therefore, public relations professionals must work closely with attorneys to carefully craft a message that puts the organization in the best possible light without compromising the legal case. While the general rule of public relations is to acknowledge mistakes, during legal proceedings the public relations message cannot omit legal responsibility for the event that is the subject of the lawsuit. However, facts will become public in the course of a legal trial, and some will reflect poorly on the company, so it's better to admit the negative facts before they're revealed in the open court. The Postal Service also issues regulations with which companies must comply. For example, People can tell companies to quit sending them junk mail. Postal regulations prohibit shipments of some dangerous items, such as explosives. The prohibition of obscene materials has been the most controversial of the postal regulations because obscenity is a matter of opinion. For example, Albert Hubbard upset people by his libertarian views that he expressed in his magazine. The Postal Service declared his magazine to be obscene, and Hubbard pleaded guilty to one felony crime in a plea deal. Then during World War II, the magazine published by Father Colin, a popular radio broadcaster, was declared to be subversive because Colin sympathized with some Nazi policies, as did a large segment of the public. Public figures such as Randolph Hearst and Lindbergh also sympathized with the Nazis in the 1930s. But after the attack on Pearl Harbor, public opinion turned against the Nazis, but Father Colligan, a Catholic priest, didn't change his message. So he was charged with aiding the enemy, and the Postal Service stopped the distribution of his magazine. Could it happen today? Perhaps. Most investors like insider trading by corporate officers because it means that officers are optimistic about the company's financial condition. But it is against the law to trade in stocks based on confidential information, and this is called illegal insider trading. This law is designed to increase investor confidence that the stock market is fair to everyone. Illegal insider trading does not have to involve corporate officers. Anyone with access to confidential corporate information can be guilty of this crime. The Securities and Exchange Commission has prosecuted barbers who learned information from corporate officers while giving them a haircut, and printers who took advantage of advanced knowledge of publications such as the corporate annual reports. Martha Stewart served time in prison because she sells stock based on a tip that she learned from a stockbroker who had access to the confidential information. Public relation professionals will have access to confidential information as they prepare a message to announce a corporate action, so they must carefully keep the information secret to avoid being charged with illegal insider trading. The Federal Trade Commission mostly looks at safety issues with products, but they also regulate advertisements, which must be truthful. The payola scandal was a bribery scheme to increase the airplay of records released by the promoter's clients. The more times a song played on the radio, the more sales of the album. There is an important distinction between publicity, promotions, and marketing. Publicity means free coverage in news media. Promotions mean paid advertisements that attempt to change public opinion about their organization. Marketing means paid commercials that increase the sales of a particular product or service. The Food and Drug Administration is in charge of medicines and food. Their biggest impact is on the drug markets. They ensure that commercials for drugs do not make unsubstantiated claims, which might harm people who rely on the commercials to make decisions about their health. They also restrict the claims used to market food items. The First Amendment guarantees freedom of speech, which includes the press. However, there are limits on the freedom of speech. For example, urging violence is against the law because that is an incitement to riot. Corporations and other organizations also have freedom of speech, but it is much more restricted than speech by private individuals. For example, the content of commercials are regulated. Some items cannot be advertised in the public media. For example, condom ads were prohibited for many years, but today they are often advertised on youth-oriented TV shows. The main type of speech protected by the First Amendment is political speech by individual private citizens. On the other hand, political speech by corporations is somewhat restricted. Lobbyists are representatives of the company that try to change the opinion of politicians. There are many laws that place tight restrictions on lobbyists, so the freedom of speech is not absolute. The Federal Communications Commission regulates wire communications such as telephones, and they also regulate over-the-air broadcast radio and TV. For example, radio disc jockeys must pass a test and earn a license to talk on air, and the FCC can revoke their license if the DJ violates regulations. But cable is beyond their control. They attempted to use their authority to regulate wire services to control the internet, but courts disagreed with that. The basic rule is that advertisements must be truthful and must not offend the public. For example, advertisements can't use topless women to advertise a product. Public relation operates within a legal framework. Lawsuits cause delicate public relation problems, but the objective is to limit damages to the organization's public image. While the Internet has reduced reliance on the United States Postal Service, postal regulations are still important for businesses. The Securities and Exchange Commission strictly governs the disclosure of confidential information about public corporations. The Federal Trade Commission ensures that commercials are truthful. The Food and Drug Administration regulates commercials for food and medicine. Broadcasters are regulated by the Federal Communications Commission. The First Amendment to the Constitution does not provide absolute protection for public speech, but instead there are legal limits. Corporations do not have the same level of freedom as do individuals, and commercial free speech is not as much protected as political public speech.